this go because you know what I came in to do.
I don't get paid for overtime. I'm here to fight.
GERVONTA versus Ryan is big but not a super fight, says Marcus John. So I read the article briefly, and basically, considering there's so much alphabet titles around for so long, and both of them have been in the lightweight division for a considerable time, and there isn't a 135-pound belt, an official belt, not an interim belt or anything like that, but an official belt on the line, because neither of them have ever fought for one. That's why. Bit of a red flag in the credibility of this being a super fight. It really is. And then to double down at that point, they're fighting at, 136? Not even at the traditional championship weight. They both ducked a lot of smoke. Neither of them have fought Lomachenko, Teofimo, Devin. Shakur's only got to the weight class recently, but neither of them have fought him either. And I'd say William Sabeda is a strong contender. None of them have took him on. Out of the two, looking at the ratings, Isaac Cruz is the strongest opponent who is currently ranked high by a lot of sanctioning bodies, and Tank outpointing him. But Ryan, go look for some opponents that Ryan has beat in all the 4 sanctioning bodies, and you'll be looking for a while. Luke Campbell was obviously ranked. That's his best opponent, but he's retired since. Both of them had opportunities to fight Devin Haney and didn't take them. These two could have got any of the fights they wanted, but they just didn't want it enough, and their promoters were playing silly buggers with the network politics. Now, I need to be careful how I approach this, because even in my own head, a lot of what I'm saying is sounding like doom and gloom. I don't want to put a downer on it, even though they haven't got a date finalized as yet. To get them this far in this current climate in American boxing is like unbelievable. So I don't want to put too much of a downer on it. And I guess the younger boxing fans who are used to this climate with politics and ducking and a lot of talk and not a lot of fighting from the title holders and quote-unquote elite contenders, I guess to them it's a super fight. And to the media members who do this for a paycheck more than a passion and don't really have any time or respect for boxing history, they may label it a super fight too. And I have no complaints with that. But make no mistake, Lomachenko versus Haney is way closer to a super fight than this. Make no mistake about it, in my opinion. You know, Tank's former promoter Mayweather, he's had a lot of super fights, but a lot of people don't include Corrales as one of them. But in comparison to this, it's a major super fight. That was at Super Feather. But, you know, this is a different climate in American boxing. This was just standard for HBO boxing to put a fight of this quality on. Nobody would say, oh, this is a major super fight. Everybody wanted to see it, but this is what we've been reduced to now. First glimmer of a decent fight. The temptation is to call it a super fight. You know, at 130 and 135, Floyd had fights with the likes of Castillo, who proved himself to be the best lightweight, Corrales, who proved himself to be an absolute menace at 130. None of these fights were on pay-per-view. And if you even suggested that we're going to put these on pay-per-view, people would have laughed at the time. They would have laughed. Imagine if the PBC had Corrales and Floyd Mayweather today, 2023, with the same resumes and accomplishments they had back in 2001. It's 100% pay-per-view today. 100%. Today they're putting on fights like Ruiz and Ortiz on pay-per-view, and Charles Martin on Ortiz. How the f*** Luis Ortiz get 2 pay-per-views on the bounce? What about Keith Thurman and Barrios? Imagine putting that on pay-per-view in 2001. Imagine even trying to do that. Tank Davis has probably had about 4 or 3 pay-per-views, and not one of them would have cut the mustard for early 2000s or the 90s. Not one of them! The only fight involving a PBC fighter in the last, let's say 4 or 5 years that I think would have been pay-per-view back in the day is Fury and Wilder 2. But there's not much more than that. There's not much more. So the PBC schedule is good, not spectacular, but it's decent. Brandon Figueroa versus Masayo, Jarrett Hurd on the undercard of that, Timsley versus Tony Harrison, Benavidez versus Plant. These are good fights. They got Fundura, Brian Mendoza, Tank versus Ryan, Puello versus Romero. Romero shouldn't be fighting for a belt of any kind. Really shouldn't. On Showbox, they've got a new generation card. That's the equivalent to what they would call a next gen card on Matchroom over here. Adames versus Julian Williams will be a good fight. They got Lubin versus Arias on the undercard. These are good fights. It's a good schedule. But where is Errol Spence is what everyone is asking. The man who has had 2 fights in, let's say, 3.5 years, going on 4 years now. The fight with Thurman hasn't been announced, and that's at 154. I have to wonder if he can make the weight right now. And I'm not talking 147, if he can make 154. I mean, if he's injured, surely they would say he was injured, and then they could reassure everybody that he's going to be back and there's not something crazy happening why the Thurman fight hasn't been announced. Spence's situation is like Tyson Fury when they talk about how long Tyson has reigned as lineal champion, but how inactive was he before he even put the gloves back on after he beat Klitschko? And Spence, the same thing. You know, are we going to talk about him being a long reigning champion without mentioning the inactivity? Another thing they have in common is they both have career-defining fights, which would sort out the undisputed titles at heavyweight and welterweight. On both sides, it looks like neither of them, Spence or Fury, have really put forward a committed effort to make the fights happen. Also missing off the schedule were the Charlo brothers. Now, I know Jamel was injured, maybe he's still in recovery, but wasn't Jamal supposed to come back and fight Selecki? That's not in the immediate future. I mean, he's been out long enough. And are there ever any penalties for these PBC fighters when they've got straps? Look how inactive the Charlo brothers and Spence are. Where's the mandatory obligations? Where are they? Why are they not on the schedule? Are they too going to become open agents as well? That's why they're not on the schedule. They might be on other networks. Manny Pacquiao, quick resume review. Miguel Cotto, Margarito, Ricky Hatton, Morales, Barrera. And I could go on. But time is limited. Adrian Broner, quick resume review. DeMarco, Ashley Theophane, Drew Jesse Vargas. I ran a poll, and Adrian Broner drenched Manny Pacquiao in who Conor BENN should fight next. And I was like, okay, this is the same Adrian Broner who Manny washed just a few years back, right? Broner is inactive. He's won 2 of his last 5 or so. And when I reasoned, well, Manny washed him on the scorecards. Manny's more consistent. Manny's not drinking every day like Adrian. Manny's probably picked up some vices in his 40s, but he's nowhere near as ill-disciplined as Adrian Broner. Why are you saying Broner is a better fight? Why? Because of the age? They're acting like Manny was a spring chicken when he washed Broner the other year. He was 40 years of age when he washed Adrian. And then we got to discuss, right? This ain't about a win or loss ratio. It's about who can you depend on? How many times has Manny Pacquiao, whether he's won or lost, disappointed when he's waiting in the ring? And how many times has Adrian Broner disappointed? This might be the most important factor of who would be the better opponent for Conor. Then when I was trying to probe further, because I'm still trying to understand the logic of these people up until now. When I was trying to probe the comment section, yeah, but the press conference would be off the chain with Broner. Nigga, please. This is your reasoning. And I'm not adverse to a can man joke. Dude is funny. But it's not worth the admission fee. Because if it's comedy, give me Dave Chappelle, Eddie Griffin. Anyway, Sean Gibbons put up a fight poster with Manny Pacquiao and Conor BENN. Conor said anytime. Sean Gibbons said waiting on Eddie. Senator Pacquiao ready to rumble. So this could be very close. I want to hear what Conor's got to say to Piers Morgan. He spoke to Piers Morgan about his recent issues, and it airs on Monday, so that'd be interesting to hear. Broner will likely get the fight ahead of Pacquiao, not if Eddie Hearn can help it necessarily, but Manny's got this lawsuit with Paradigm Sports, who managed Conor McGregor. They paid Manny $3 million plus, and they were supposed to have a say in his future fights, but he kept fighting with the PBC, and according to them, he breached his contract. The lawsuit is this month. So when Sean Gibbons is saying he's waiting on promoter Hearn for a possible Conor BENN fight, it's actually the other way around, I guess. Hearn's probably waiting to see if Pacquiao and Gibbons can get the all clear from this lawsuit.
According to Practical Law, Thomson Reuters, The principle that an individual should be free to follow his trade and use his skills without undue interference.
Restriction of trade. Well, I don't do the legalese thing, but the board could be asking for trouble here. If they're going to try and use whatever influence they have to persuade the other top commissions around the world not to let Conor Benn fight, they are in effect trying to stop the man from making a living and feed his kid and his wife. Let's remember, UCAD didn't pop this guy. VADA popped him. The WBC used VADA for the clean boxing program. And if that sanctioning body sees fit to rank Conor, as long as the fight isn't licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control, they should be keeping their nose out of it. It's getting spiteful, you know. They've took licenses or wouldn't license certain boxers out here, and they haven't told the Malta, the German licensees, who work in the UK as well, which some of you probably didn't know. It's not just the British Boxing Board of Control who regulate events out here. You do know that. But yeah, they haven't went to the other licensees. You better not license that guy because he failed the MRI scan with the board. They haven't did that. But they're telling other licensees not to license Conor. Spiteful. And I tell you what, forget Conor, right? Conor's issues are Conor's issues. The board have pushed themselves into a corner now. So anytime that UCAD and VADA are testing the same contest in this country and VADA pops somebody, they better keep the same energy they've kept with Conor and suspend them and acknowledge VADA's findings, and don't do that dumb shit that they did with Billy Joe Saunders and Andrade in the Massachusetts Commission. Them days are over. So they officially recognize VADA now, right? They officially recognize VADA now. On the strength that they won't let Conor fight in the UK, they officially recognize VADA. Spare a thought for O'Hara Davis and Lewis Ritson. They are in a CROSSROADS fight tomorrow in Newcastle. It's a WBA eliminator. I saw O'Hara Davis box at the Anthony Joshua Charles Martin Open Workout. Scored a lot of KOs on the come up, did O'Hara. Started on the small hall circuit with the good wins. Then got signed to Eddie Hearn a couple of years into his career. He understood the value of self-promotion, and the miscommunication about the Hillsborough incident connected to football when he was trying to sell a potential fight with Tommy Coyle, another Matchroom fighter, ended his tenure at Matchroom. Even though O'Hara was too young and he's not a football fan like that, he didn't know anything about the story and was misquoted out of turn, and people knew this and they still pursued to make him the bad guy in the narrative. That's why he keeps saying they threw me under the bus, and it ended pretty badly with him and Eddie. He lost to Josh Taylor. He was 15-0 at the time on a Cyclones card when Taylor was hooked up with them. Shortly after that, he parted ways with Eddie acrimoniously. Then he did the Frank Warren thing. Lost a close decision to Jack Catterall. Terrible fight to watch. And I don't know how they scored it for Catterall, and I wouldn't make a case for him scoring it for O'Hara either. It was a horrible fight. They're the only two losses of his 26-fight career. He hooked up with MTK. He won that tournament, which was a little fixed. Let's keep it real. He didn't beat Miguel Vasquez and got gifted a decision. Just like Tyrone McKenna never beat Muhammad. He never beat him either. But McKenna and O'Hara were hooked up with MTK. They got to the final. O'Hara won the final, deservedly. Majority decision, but I thought O'Hara won clearly enough. We know what happened to MTK. No need to rehash that. He's had one fight in Dubai since then and another one in Leeds under different promoters. I don't recall neither of them fights being picked up by any of the major networks in the UK. So he's been with both the big promoters, Frank Warren and Eddie. Did his thing with MTK. Lewis Ritson, he won the Northern Area title by stoppage in 2016 with Phil Jeffries, who's promoting tomorrow's show. Started with Phil Jeffries in the Northeast. Then 2018, he's on the big stage with Eddie. He was known as the Geordie Golovkin when he was at Matchroom. He had that run, didn't he, on Matchroom. Robbie Barrett, Joe Murray, Scott Cardle, Paul Hyland. Another import was flattened. And at the time, he was hot. He was hot news on MATCHROOM. Found his limitations in that European title bid and was outpointed by Francesco Patera comprehensively at the Newcastle Arena. They tried to put it down to weight, but it really wasn't weight. It was just two different levels and skill. Regardless, for a fighter who hadn't won a British title yet, he was still doing huge gates even after that loss in the Northeast. Huge gates all the way up until his last fight with MATCHROOM. I believe that was with Ponce, who lost the IBF title bid against Subriel Matthias just the other day. And then he ends up doing the Pro Bellum thing, similar to O'Hara Davis, Pro Bellum / MTK, for his last couple of fights. 29 years of age, 23 wins, 13 of them wins via the short route, 2 losses. He takes on O'Hara, who is 31 years of age, 24 wins, 17 inside the distance, 2 losses as well. They're at CROSSROADS. And after being with all these big promoters in the country and being touted as potential contenders, they find themselves in this eliminator, which couldn't find itself a home at Sky, DAZN, BT, Channel 5. None of them picked it up. It will be on the Fight Network. And it just goes to show you, you can't take nothing for granted in this game here. You really can't. You know I'm a bit slow on the technology. If I work out how to use the fight thing, even if they charge, I'm going to cover this card. I will cover this card live just to support. Because basically, the loser has a long way back in this one. A long, long way back. The winner gets a lifeline to get back in the game.